in the next 10 minutes. Why a country lost 60% of its power in 5 seconds. Why the machines running your AI are quietly rewriting your electric bill. Why the part that could fix it takes 4 years just to order. And why, when you ask who's actually in charge of keeping your lights on, the honest answer is nobody. Here's what's really going on with the grid. In April 2025, Spain lost 60% of its electricity in 5 seconds. It took investigators 2 months to explain why. You picture the grid as one thing, a national machine humming along, run from some control room somewhere. It isn't. The American grid is roughly 3,000 separate utilities, stitched together with wires that mostly weren't designed to talk to each other, held in balance by physics that has almost no room for error. There is no single off switch, and there is no single on switch either. It's a live negotiation, happening every second, between machines that were mostly built before anyone alive today was hired to run them. And right now, that negotiation is losing. Most of the wires carrying power into your house were strung in the 1960s and 70s, during the biggest infrastructure build-out in American history. Transmission lines are engineered to last 50 to 80 years. Today, 70% of the country's lines and transformers are already past 25 years old. 60% of circuit breakers are past 30. The American Society of Civil Engineers grades the whole system a D+, a $5 trillion repair bill, deferred for decades because the lights mostly stayed on. That system was sized for a country that used electricity to run refrigerators and factories. It is now being asked to run something else entirely. In 2026, global data centers are on pace to consume roughly 565 terawatt hours of electricity, a 26% jump in a single year. AI-focused data centers alone saw their power use grow 50% in 2025, 16 times faster than global electricity demand overall. Some industry forecasts put total data center consumption above 1,200 terawatt hours by the early 2030s. More electricity than Japan, a country of 120 million people, uses in an entire year. The United States hosts something like 45% of the world's AI data center capacity. Northern Virginia, Texas, and Phoenix are absorbing the brunt of it. In Ireland, data centers already account for more than a fifth of the entire country's electricity use. Here's the part that doesn't make headlines. At least 75 U.S. data center projects, worth a combined $130 billion, have already been delayed or canceled. Not for lack of money, not for lack of chips, for lack of power. Here's the physics problem nobody explains. Electricity, at grid scale, can't really be stored in bulk. What gets generated has to be consumed in the same instant, and the entire system runs on a heartbeat, 60 cycles per second in the US. If generation and demand drift out of sync by even a fraction of a percent, the frequency slips, and equipment across the grid starts protecting itself by disconnecting. That's not a metaphor. That's the actual failure mode. So, when a single new AI data center campus asks to draw as much power as a mid-sized city, all at once, operators can't just turn up the dial. They have to find that much new generation, that much new transmission capacity, and enough new equipment to move it before they can say yes. The single biggest bottleneck is a piece of equipment most people have never thought about: the power transformer. These are custom built, some the size of a house, and they're the thing that actually steps voltage up and down as electricity moves from power plant to substation to your street. Lead times for high-capacity transformers now stretch up to 4 years. More than 40 million U.S. distribution transformers, over half the fleet, are already operating past their expected service life. Industry analysts project a 30% supply deficit for power transformers in 2026 alone. You cannot build a data center or replace storm-damaged lines or expand a substation faster than you can get the transformer to do it. Before any new power plant, solar farm, gas plant, battery site can connect to the grid, it has to join something called the interconnection queue. Right now, that queue holds about 2,600 gigawatts of proposed projects, more than double the entire generating capacity of the United States. The median wait to actually get connected is approaching 5 years. For some data center projects, it's closer to 12. Roughly 80% of projects that enter the queue eventually give up and withdraw. Not because the power isn't needed, because the wait and the cost of grid upgrades assigned to them makes the math stop working. Quick pause. If you're learning something from this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss out on more breakdowns like this one. On April 28th, 2025, just after noon, Spain lost 15 gigawatts of electricity, about 60% of its national supply, in 5 seconds. Portugal, wired into the same grid, went down with it. Trains stopped mid-track. Traffic lights died. Hospitals switched to generators. Investigators ruled out a cyber attack. What they found instead was almost more unsettling. A cascade of ordinary technical failures. Voltage oscillations. A power plant that should have been backed up and wasn't. Generators disconnecting themselves in a chain reaction, compounding in 12 seconds flat. The report's blunt conclusion: poor planning by the grid operator on a system nobody thought was fragile enough to fail like that. It's the clearest demonstration on record of what happens when a modern grid, run by real-time physics with almost no margin, gets one thing slightly wrong. It's not just software and weather. Substations are, physically, some of the least defended critical infrastructure in the country. Open-air equipment yards, often behind nothing more than a chain link fence. NERC's most recent tracking recorded more than 3,500 physical security incidents against North American grid infrastructure in a single year, up from 2,800 2 years earlier. In the western U.S. alone, reported incidents more than doubled between 2023 and 2024. In December 2022, a coordinated attack on 2 substations in Moore County, North Carolina, knocked out power to 45,000 people for days. In 2024, a man was arrested for planning to attack a Nashville substation with an explosive armed drone. The grid was built assuming most of its 2,600 gigawatts of exposure would just never be tested. That assumption is being tested more often every year. All of this, the shortage, the queue, the strain, shows up somewhere, and it's showing up on electric bills. In the mid-Atlantic region alone, the auction that sets future power prices jumped from just under $29 per megawatt day to over $329, hitting the regulatory price cap 2 years running. Data centers were responsible for 63% of that increase, roughly $9.3 billion in added cost, passed on to everyone else on the grid. Some households have already seen bills rise by $20 a month. Longer-term projections put the added cost cumulatively above $100 billion by the early 2030s. You didn't build a data center. You're paying for one anyway. So, who's steering this? Nobody exactly. A federal agency, FERC, regulates power that crosses state lines. It delegates reliability rules to a nonprofit, NERC, which writes and enforces the standards but doesn't own a single wire. Regional operators, PJM, ERC, OT, MISO, and others run the day-to-day markets and keep supply and demand matched in real time. And underneath all of that, the actual poles, wires, and substations belong to roughly 3,000 separate utility companies, some investor-owned, some municipal, some tiny rural cooperatives. It's a system built for consensus, not speed. And now a new kind of customer has entered that negotiation. Hyperscale tech companies with enough capital to fund their own power plants, sign private transmission deals, and jump to the front of interconnection queues that everyone else has waited years for. The grid isn't run by one authority. Increasingly, it's shaped by whoever can pay to move fastest through the parts of it that are still slow. The grid held for a century by being boring, overbuilt, over-engineered, forgotten. That era is over. Demand is compounding faster than the physical parts needed to meet. It can be manufactured, permitted, or connected. And the one dry run we've had in Spain showed how little margin is actually left when it does slip. Nobody is going to fix this by flipping a switch. It's going to be fixed the way it was built, slowly, underground and overhead, one transformer, one substation, and one very long queue at a time.